Hi, folks. We're very fortunate to be able to catch a quick interview with James O'Keefe of Project Veritas, who's come on to tell us about his new book, American Muckraker. So, James, what's the book about? Can you give us a brief overview, please?
Well, this book is about how to do journalism in clown world, in a world where truth is not what things are not what they seem, and often not rarely as they should be. This book teaches you how to get the information, the unauthorized information that you can't get from the media. It's a tale as old as time, but we give solutions. We talk about whistleblowing. We talk about propaganda. We talk about some of the heroism that our people, our whistleblowers have, and also sort of the traditional media and how things have broken. But it's ultimately a hopeful book because it gives people a handbook, a how-to manual, the boundaries of privacy, ethics, deception, whistleblowing. There's even a chapter in this book called Suffering, about what it takes to endure the attacks against your reputation for telling the truth.
Well, that's a great place to start, in fact. So what do you think has gone wrong with American journalism in the modern era? Or has it always been this way?
It's always been this way to a degree. I think things are more polarized than ever before. There's a Manichaean existence in political life, and solutions are outside of the legislative process. Our government is in such a state of sclerosis at this point in time. But really, it's the consolidation of the media. There's in chapter 2 of this book, I go back to the printing press in Venice, to the video age, to the information age, to the rise of the oligarchy with Facebook and Google and Twitter swallowing all of the newspapers, the decimation of newspapers, the death of investigative journalism bureaus. The ABC News axed their investigative bureau. Most of the time, the two imperatives in journalism is to be first and to reduce expense. So investigative journalism is much different than beat reporting. If you're just a beat reporter, you're often relaying information that your source gives to you, even if that information is incorrect. Like at the Washington Post or the New York Times newsroom, they just take information from their sources in government and feed it to you, even if that information is propaganda or not true. Whereas investigative journalism, you're challenging, you're printing what somebody else does not want printed. And to do that in this day and age is harder than ever. You get attacked ruthlessly, you get censored. But rather than complain about it and talk about how horrible things are, this book tells you some pretty amazing stories of successes that I think if we replicate, if we do this times 1,000, it will help save society's collapse.
And that is really the core of the problem with journalism in the modern day, isn't it? Because it's merely an amplification of government press releases. We get exactly the same problem in Britain, that you guys have in America, where the regime will put out a press statement, and this will just be relayed uncritically to the wider masses, and no actual journalism is ever done. Do you think that this is changing in the era of social media?
In some ways, it's getting better, and in some ways, it's getting worse. The Librarian of Congress, Dan Vorstin, talked about this in his book, The Image, which I quote extensively. And he says, the press, when you relay information from someone in the government, usually it's the people in government that are manipulating the reporter, not the other way around. So I think it's getting, unless you use undercover work, we use undercover techniques, we use hidden cameras, we use pretense, and we're attacked for that. But there's a chapter in this book called Deception, and I present the paradox of relative deception. What does that mean? It means that you have a choice to make if you're a truth teller. Either you can deceive your subject in order to tell the truth to the audience, or you can be honest with your subject. And if you're honest with your subject, oftentimes you'll deceive your audience. For example, if I show up to the Pentagon and I say, "Hey, please tell me about all the fraud you're committing," they're not going to tell me about the fraud. But and that, of course, that makes you guys laugh. But this is what journalism does these days. Hi, Mr. Biden, tell me what you're doing to solve the problem in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Of course, we saw the hot mic moment the other day where he called the guy a son of a bitch.
Yep.
We saw the hot mic moment from Amy Robach, which I talked about Jeffrey Epstein. ABC News spiked the story on Jeff Epstein to protect their access to the British royal family. They wanted to cover Kate and Will, and they wouldn't talk about Jeff Epstein. This is according to Amy Robach at ABC News. We would not know this, but not for the hot mic during the commercial break. So we have to use hidden cameras, and we have to use disguise and subterfuge in order to tell the truth. This book just, talks about the boundaries of deception and privacy in a world where, again, we are living in, as George Orwell would say, 2 + 2 = 5 world.
And I always find this rather a hollow accusation either as well, because, I mean, we are constantly on a daily basis being lied to either directly or by omission by the media. And then Project Veritas does something that, sure, you can characterize as slightly underhanded in order to get the truth out of those people through a hidden camera or something like that. And then they have the gall to call you deceptive and liars. And it's like, sorry, that's what you guys do on a daily basis, and we all see it all the time. So I've got no issue with the way that Project Veritas has operated, because the only way to get this inside information, because like you say, they're not just going to give you it.
They say it's about our methods. It's never about that. It's about whose ox you're goring. It's about what you're exposing. And in a world where people are so divided, more than ever before, it's almost Civil War level of divisiveness over facts. Of course, if you investigate Planned Parenthood or these sorts of organizations that are good organizations that help people, well, they're going to say that we're deceptive. So it's really about images. I talk about images in this book, the power of image. Human nature is such that if you show people video, it'll supersede other forms of propaganda, and that's our hypothesis with Project Veritas. Is if you show them cinema verite, that is to say, videotape of people doing the behavior, that'll like rock beats scissors, override the propaganda that people are fed.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? How the institutions have an approved set of other institutions that they will all draw a circle around and circle the wagons and say, these are ours. And if you attack them, then you're a villain. And there is the same thing happens on the Republican side. And I'm genuinely concerned about the kind of unraveling of the American fabric. And I think that we saw this obviously most prominently with the deplatforming of Donald Trump in all the same day on all of the Silicon Valley platforms. Is it wrong to describe this as a kind of cartel?
No, I mean, Matt Drudge gave a speech at the National Press Club in 1998, and you can kind of see it. They are a cartel, and there's a symbiotic relationship between, for example, the FBI, Pfizer, and the New York Times. It's not supposed to be like that. We released documents. Judicial Watch did a Freedom of Information Act request and found that the New York Times was talking to the FBI and Pfizer was talking to the FBI about me. Why are pharmaceutical companies talking to the Federal Bureau of Investigation about me? So yeah, I would say it's a cartel designed to keep out information, but propaganda has limited impact, because the truth, if you just shine a little bit of a light in a dark room, it'll make the kind of whole room illuminate. That's the hypothesis behind Project Veritas.
And that's really the main cardinal sin that Project Veritas has committed against these institutions, isn't it? Because they have a kind of gated narrative, and the narrative is projected out universally. It's always the same narrative from all of these institutions. And that's what you do, is you're showing, well, there's a gap in this narrative, or here's a fact that contradicts the narrative. Why do you think this is? What do you think the narrative is so important for?
Well, I mean, there's a chapter in this book I call Propaganda, and I talk about Edward Bernays and Dean Lippman and this whole idea that they need to create these illusions, these oversimplifications. There's actually a term called stereotype, which you all know the word. It was invented by these sort of paragons of journalism in the early 20th century. People are too stupid to, if you give them the raw data, the argument goes that they'll draw the wrong conclusions. That if you give people complex data and you give them all this information, we can't have that. We need to have an educated class of professionals, a specialized class of men who are able to interpret the data for you. So it's almost like, don't show them the image. Do not show them the video. We need to describe the video, right? That's what newspapers have become. And the best part about modern technology and the reason why people have become so divided is the narrative's breaking down. You're slipping the distributed idea suppression complex, to quote Eric Weinstein. You show people the image, it supersedes whatever words they use to describe you. Let me give you one example of this. The New York Times published my attorney-client privilege documents, which is it's central to American jurisprudence not to violate the attorney-client privilege. After the FBI raided my home, somehow the New York Times obtained my attorney-client memos, published them, and in the letter, in the New York Times, the New York Times published an article saying documents show how far deceptive reporting practices could go before running afoul of federal laws. That sounds pretty horrible, right? It sounds like I've done something wrong. Actually, what it showed was that we checked with lawyers to make sure everything we were doing was legal. So the way they're able to word things is just horrible, and the way they're able to manipulate reality is horrible. We believe video and audio can supersede that.
So now that we've laid out the general landscape of the problem, I guess the big question, and this is one that I have not got any idea about, is how can this be reformed? How can it be fixed?
Well, that's what I talk about in this book. Most people are cynical and hopeless and think that, I mean, I'm just going to be blunt with you. People whine a lot. They complain. I'm tired of the complaining and the victim mentality, particularly on the right. I thought that the right likes to say that the left whines, but I've seen more whining and bitching from people in this country. Look at the comment section. Nothing ever happens. No one's held accountable. Nothing's going to change. Well, with that mentality, certainly nothing's going to change. But I talk about stories of brave people that have done this work. Most recently, Major Murphy in the United States Marine Corps came out and did a story about wrote a letter for DARPA, which is the Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and a source came to us inside the Department of Defense and gave us this information, and it showed that the gain of function research was approved from EcoHealth Alliance to DARPA. Rather, it was rejected on the grounds it's too dangerous. But Anthony Fauci approved it under his leadership at NIAID. So we need more good people in the government to come out and expose what's going on. It does involve some suffering, some pain, some sacrifice. I think we all suffer in life in one way or another, but I think we have a choice to make. We have to follow our conscience, and we have to do the right thing, even if it involves sacrifice and suffering.
Yeah, at the end of the day, as you say, it's the right thing to do. And if you don't do it, you're essentially complicit with this regime of lies anyway. So is that really something you can accept? So I hate to ask, but because you are right about people whining about big tech censorship and that. But I am curious, how much have you been censored? Because one thing that I've noticed, that Project Veritas has been very, very effective in injecting its breaking news and journalism into the mainstream dialogue. And I've seen that you've been taken off Twitter and various other platforms. Could you give us a quick rundown of the platforms you personally have been banned from? And it's not like you are swearing or putting out, indecent content or anything like this. It's entirely political as far as I've been able to tell. So can you give us a quick rundown just so we can see the scope of the problem?
Well, we're banned on Twitter. We're banned on Twitter. Project Veritas is banned on Twitter. And I apologize. I'm in transit, just so that your audience knows. We're breaking a story this evening, a fairly big one.
No, it's fine. I appreciate that you've got the time.
We're banned on Twitter. I'm banned on Twitter personally. Project Veritas is banned. But every story that we've done has trended on Twitter. Every single one since our banning. And you might say, well, how is that possible? Because the stories are so strong, content is king, that the stories tend to effuse their way out into the different platforms, even if we can't distribute them ourselves. So there's a lot of complaining. You said people whine about censorship. I'm not of the opinion we should go into these different platforms that where we preach to the choir. I don't like that. I've never done that. I think art's important for outlets which don't agree with us to report these stories. That's why we engage with the New York Times and Twitter. That's why when we're trending number one.
So I think the connection's broken up a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You're back.
I don't know how much of that answer you caught, but I think it's important for us not to preach to the choir. I think it's important to expose facts on platforms that don't agree with us.
So what can we do about the big tech monopoly then, ultimately?
What we can do is expose them. The only thing they fear is being exposed. They don't fear the government. They don't fear Congress. The only thing that they fear is sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we have to get access to their processes on the inside. We've done stories inside Facebook showing vaccine hesitancy, Google's algorithmic fairness. The only thing we can do is expose them. I believe that sincerely, and I would ask anybody who disagree with me, please come up with an alternative.
Yeah, this is a question I have to answer a lot as well. And the inevitable pushback is, well, what then? what happens after we expose them? Because as you said, the Fauci funding gain of research, nothing's happened to Fauci, and I've got to say that's a good point.
When people say nothing happens, what do they want to happen? What is people's ideal outcome? Because if it's jailing people you don't like, that's not okay. I mean, people say Anthony Fauci needs to be in jail. Everyone needs to be in jail. It's like the SNL skit, jail your enemies. I don't want people to be in jail. I want them to be exposed, because ultimately people wake up. The pendulum swings. People vote their elected representatives. The problem you have in American society is that people are divided over facts. There's only one reality. There's only one truth, right? There's not multiple realities. I mean, my shirt is green. My shirt is not purple and green. It's one.
Well, that's exactly the problem at the moment, isn't it? Is that the Democrats and the Republicans are living in parallel realities.
Is that people are divided on basic facts. So the hope is, but we have to solve the problem you have to solve the first problem first. You have to get 80% of people to agree that my shirt is green before you can talk about what's the solution to that. You can't talk about solutions unless people disagree about this vaccine. They disagree about whether there is corruption. They disagree with whether there was the gain of function research done at the Department of Defense. Let's establish what the facts are. Let's establish that Anthony Fauci is indeed lying, if he is lying about the fact that he approved the gain of function research at NIAID. Either he did or he didn't. It's only one of the other, right? So we have to solve that problem before we can talk about what the solution is. Because the problem is, if you jump to the solution, you have the tragedy of the modern political system. If it's just about power, right? If it's about shoving the conclusion down people's throats, it's not going to work. You're going to have a societal collapse. So, I go back to 1984, which is the year I was born. George Orwell, United Kingdom. George Orwell said, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. If that is granted, all else follows. So the first thing we have to do is establish this reality. I know it's a big lift. I know they just want by fiat, make it so, but you're gonna go towards some type of, whatever the modern version of a civil war is. I don't know what that looks like. Unless you have some consensus. Investigative journalism is about forging consensus, bringing people together, creating a moral consensus around these issues. We got to do that first.
I think I see where you're going, because the issue is essentially isolating the talking heads who are lying about the facts from the people that they are lying to, isn't it? Because the assumption, I suppose, is that the people they're lying to are why their consensus, the left consensus, can be allowed to obtain in such a wide manner. If we can expose, as you say, and point out, well, look, these things are true, then either the people themselves are going to have to say, well, okay, look, I'm a liar as well, or they will suddenly understand that those people who have lied to them are the ones who have lied to them. It's like Mark Twain said, isn't it? It's easier to fool someone than persuade them they've been fooled. So this isn't exactly an easy task, is it?
Well, I think that's it. It's not an easy task, and people aren't willing to do it. People want the easy route, right? Let's just, by fiat, demand people comply with what we want. Do you want to live in that world? It's this whole idea of consent. It goes back to the American founding principles, which I write about in this book. The First Amendment is the right that it sounds corny, it sounds cliche, but I'm going to say it. The First Amendment is the right that makes all of our other rights possible. It's about informed consent, not manufactured consent. You cannot make decisions to exercise your rights and duties in an intelligent fashion without access to real information. And some might say, well, that doesn't matter to them. Okay, well, if it doesn't matter to them, we're headed towards, again, civil war. And there's nothing we can do to avoid that. If you actually believe it, nothing matters. If that's your prerogative, then there's no point to life.
Well, that's exactly the problem.
I'm tired of the cynicism. I'm going to be direct with you, and forgive my directness, but I'm going to go for it. No, absolutely. I'm tired of the whining. I'm tired of the bitching. Not by you. I'm tired of the whining and bitching.
I'm on your side on this completely.
And I'm tired of the comment section. Half of the comments under our post is nothing ever happens to these people. Well, guess what? things do happen to these people. I'll give you an example. Rick Salibi at CNN was exposed for soliciting pictures of an underage girl, his fiance's 15-year-old daughter, for horrible. He was fired or he resigned by CNN, but not for the work that my colleagues did, and but not for the brave whistleblower who, a former sex worker, came to me. That man would still be working for CNN. So when you say nothing ever happens to these people, you're lying. Now,
just as a quick aside, I think it's the case is just that they're not getting the information because it's not like the media are thrilled that one of their own has been exposed as a pedophile or something like that.
Yes, but then the more logical statement is not enough is happening. So the answer to that is we need to do more. The answer is we need to do more of what we need to do. And as far as I'm concerned, you're either helping or you're part of the problem. You can either do something, you can be brave or do something. I don't need everyone to do it. This book talks about, we need 1% of people to do it, or 0.001%. We don't need everyone to do this. No, we don't need everyone to be, but we do need people. You got 120,000 people working for the Department of Justice, right? The FBI, DOJ. How many people inside the Department of Justice had the stones to come out publicly and say what they did to me was wrong? They raided my home, right, over my journalism. But you know what? I know people privately who said that to me. But why don't they have the courage to say it publicly? Is it because they don't want to lose their job? Is it because they don't want to lose their pension or their mortgage? So this is
it's their friends as well. It's their social sphere. It's the entire water they swim in will reject them. That's what they're afraid of.
Well, and that's and now we're really having the heart of the matter. Now we're really getting to the interesting point. Now we're talking about what really matters. Nothing happens to these people. It's that you have a choice to make. To quote the late Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, you can follow your conscience and give up your livelihood, or you can maintain your livelihood and live by lies. And ultimately, in society, our society becomes systemically corrupt, and we have to betray our own children, our own sense of purpose and truth to maintain, to survive at any price. And that's not the world that I want to live in. And I cannot philosophize courage. I cannot convince people to do this by virtue of me being articulate or even writing a book. What I can do is tell the stories of people who've done it and survived. And there is life after whistleblowing.
Well, that's if I don't know how much longer you've got, so I guess we'll make this the last question. But that's what I wanted to end on, is a more optimistic note, because I've been through the fire. If you Google my name, it's not good results that you get in much the same way as yours. And I think that at least if one thing comes of this, that both people like you and I were a good example that no, you can live and thrive after all of this. It's not the end of the world. It might look terrifying before you take that jump, but it's really not as bad as they say, is it?
No, it's not. I wrote the first chapter of this book is called Suffering. You might say, why did you write? Why is the first chapter of your book about a theme like that? Well,
I totally understand, but yeah.
Because I think it does involve pain. I do. I think it involves some real pain, some psychological trauma. Richard Hopkins, the postal worker who in Pennsylvania last election year, he talked about ballots being backdated. He witnessed this, and he was interrogated by federal agents. And he was a Marine veteran. He was a combat veteran in Afghanistan. He got shot at overseas. And this man told me, James, he said, I'm going to quote him, "I'll tell you, James, I'd rather be out back in Afghanistan getting shot at by Afghans than having to be in this kind of position, being interrogated by federal agents, forcing me to recant what I said, having the Washington Post defame my reputation." I mean, in combat, events have a duration of seconds, sometimes minutes. But this sort of psychological assault by the press, you're assaulted psychologically, you're assaulted financially, which is its own kind of violence because it's directed at your children. This guy had a 4-year-old daughter. And when the system cannot persuade or propagandize, it punishes through coercion. But if you keep going, if you keep doing it, despite this, you can oftentimes be emboldened and be stronger. A lot of our people come to us because of what we've been through. And there is life after whistleblowing. And just like any survivor of psychological abuse, you develop your own kind of superpowers. You cease to be afraid of them. And to quote Ernest Hemingway, the man thought that no thing could hurt him so long as he did not care.
Mm.
When you cease to give them this power that they don't have over you, CNN and the Washington Post, yes, they have the power to humiliate you. Instagram and Twitter, yes, they have the power to censor you. But when you do the journalism anyway, I'm not even on Twitter, and our story is #1 trending on Twitter. You send a message to other people that they could do it too, because we are nothing. Okay, I am nothing. I don't have any power. I'm not a politician. I don't have literal power. And they have tremendous, and they've got a lot of power, but I'm not alone. And there's a lot of people. I would say the majority of people. I think it's safe to say there is the majority of people in these institutions that happen to agree that what they're doing is wrong. We just need a tiny fraction of those people to speak up. This book, American Muckraker, tells their stories and gives you the, the courage and the hope to do it.
James, thank you so much for joining us, and honestly, good luck in the future, man.
And thank you so much for bearing with me as I'm in a moving vehicle. We appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you very much. Cheers.